Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Thursday and happy holiday season to you, your loved ones, and your organizations. We're happy to have you here to talk about best practices, how to get started with your diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Before we even jump into our presentation, Lisa and I find it important to one, introduce ourselves, but also let you know why diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DE&I, is important to us as individuals. So I'm William Cooper. I am a senior financial wellness educator here at Sentinel. I also serve as our DE&I advisor, and I'm a member of our DE&I advisory council. DE&I is very important to me because, as you can imagine, as a Black male, I've been subject to certain microaggressions or certain negative stereotypes about my identity that have, of course, made me feel not well in certain situations. But in addition to that, I see how DE&I is important to many aspects of our identity. For example, as being from Detroit, wearing my natural hair, and even things such as age, I've also been in situations where I've felt certain stereotypes and have been mistreated due to those identities. So for me as an individual, I see the benefit of DE&I, and I know that DE&I is truly important for all individuals. Hey, Lisa.
Hey, Will. So, as Will mentioned, my name is Lisa Hamill. I am a people and culture generalist here at Sentinel Benefits. I also serve on the DEI Advisory Council. Specifically, I serve on the People and Culture, or P&C, as I'll probably call it, subcommittee, meaning I work with a small group of people that are all part of the DEI Advisory Council. And we kind of serve as a liaison between the overall council and my team of people and culture, working together to put initiatives forward, check in on policies, things like that. DEI is important to me personally for some of the same reasons Will mentioned, different treatment I've received because I'm female, my age, other factors. However, it's also really important to me professionally. Part of why I began my career in HR stemmed from the desire to make workplaces a place that everyone feels comfortable to bring their full selves. And their full selves mean different things to everybody, but I want them to feel valued and respected. I also am a firm believer in the fact that diverse perspectives make for better, more progressive organizations. And so that's something that I strive for every day. So this is a really important topic to both of us.
Thanks, Lisa. All right, everyone, let's jump right in. Now that we've introduced ourselves, let's go ahead and get started with best practices, how to get started with your diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. If you've been around with Sentinel for some time, you know that over the past few years, we've had conversations about DE&I. And thinking back to 2020, many organizations, including our own, decided to take a step up and ramp up our DE&I initiatives, given various situations across our country, such as the pandemic, the unfortunate George Floyd situation, and so many other situations. Now, since 2020, some individuals, some employees of organizations have found that their organizations are talking the talk about DE&I, but they don't see that their organizations are walking the walk. So for today's presentation, we want to talk to you a little bit about what Sentinel has done over these past few years. And these are some ideas or strategies that you can keep in mind and consider when thinking about your organization's specific DE&I practices. Today, we'll review our definition of what we think DE&I is. We'll talk about its importance and, again, things that you might want to consider when thinking about a strategy for your organization. And we'll also share what's worked well for us at Sentinel. And at the end of our presentation, we will definitely have a Q&A session. Now, one thing to keep in mind before we start this presentation is that Lisa and we are not necessarily DE&I experts. We are just folks who genuinely care about the topic. We genuinely care about making our country and our organization a better place for all. We'll be reviewing what has worked well for us, but one thing you want to keep in mind when thinking about your organization's DEI strategy, you want a strategy that is unique to your organization. To give you an example, I'll set the tone thinking about conversations of DE&I across different countries. For example, we know that here in America, we are a melting pot of so many beautiful races, ethnicities, backgrounds, races, etc. So when we think about DE&I, those types of topics are paramount. However, when comparing America to another country such as Japan, we know that Japan is a homogenous society, a society that enjoys a shared culture, shared language, shared ethnicity. So, when thinking about these two countries, a country like Japan, their conversations about DEI might look different from those here in America. For example, with DEI in Japan, since they're a homogenous culture, their DEI conversations might focus on other topics such as language or regional dialect with the type of Japanese that is spoken, or even factors about age. So, again, keep in mind that when thinking about your organization's strategy, it should be unique to your organization based on your population, your business units, the region that you're in, etc. Moving forward, we want to talk about how we think about DEI here at Sentinel. Now, the thing is, when we hear about DEI, we often hear about D, E, and I together as a conglomerate. But each of these components have different definitions and they mean different things. Diversity represents the presence of beautiful differences that enrich our workplace and also our country. So, when thinking about dimensions of diversity, of course, we think about things such as race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, sexual identity, or gender identity, excuse me, or even ability status. However, when thinking about dimensions of diversity, there are other things that we must consider as well, things that we don't commonly think about, such as education level, religion, region lived in, socioeconomic status, familial status, and more. Equity refers to ensuring that access, resources, and opportunities are provided to all to be able to succeed and grow. And when thinking about the equity piece of DE&I, it's important to have a balance. Of course, recognizing that DEI is for all individuals, regardless of your race, age, background, etc., but also keeping in mind that equity is important to make sure that we rectify or change historical issues or historical barriers that have been in place for certain underrepresented groups. And then inclusion represents a workplace or even a society's culture that is welcoming to all people, where everyone is valued, respected, and able to reach their full potential. We can't illustrate this enough. DE and I is for everyone. Now, we've talked about these individual components. However, as I mentioned earlier, DE&I is often thought of as one conglomerate. Lisa, when we put all of these things together, how do we think about this?
Thanks, Will. I think it's interesting to think about this for organizations from an HR perspective. For me, at the HR level in an organization, it's about recognizing and appreciating the uniqueness of each of your employees. That's the diversity. Ensuring that everyone has equal access to resources and opportunities for personal and professional development within the workplace, equity. And finally, ultimately creating a culture that empowers and engages everyone, full stop, regardless of what you bring to the table, what you bring to the workplace in terms of every unique part of you, ensuring that you feel comfortable, valued, and welcomed. And all those things together are what create an inclusive organization in the framework of DEI.
Now, we've defined DE&I. Now we'd like to talk about why DEI is important from multiple perspectives. Oftentimes, when making the case for DEI, we often hear about DE&I is important for business continuity. It's important for the business perspective. That's important, and we'll talk about that shortly. But one thing you want to keep in mind is that DEI is truly important just from the humanistic perspective. We're all individuals, and we know that everyone wants to feel valued and respected as an individual. Of course, our identities, our race, our age, where we're from, our religion, etc., make up who we are. However, we want to be viewed as individuals. And also thinking about the importance of mental health. I'm pretty sure that we can all agree that conversations about mental health and the taboos that used to be in place when talking about mental health have improved from 10 years ago and even 5 years ago. We always have the conversation of be nice to individuals. You never know what someone may be going through. So, as we continue conversations about mental health in our society, it's important that we just treat each other kindly. Super important. And according to a Gallup poll, it's important to realize that our country's culture is also continuing to shift. According to this Gallup poll, Generational Z individuals as well as millennials are making up 46% of the full time workforce in the US. And of course, we know this number will only increase over time as certain individuals are aging out of the workforce. And this poll also shows that individuals of Generation Z and the millennial generations truly see the importance of having leaders who support a diverse and inclusive workforce. Now, of course, this is not to say that individuals of the boomer or Generation X generations do not care about diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is not saying that at all. This is just saying that when looking at individual generations at the holistic level, that these younger generations are finding more importance of working for a diverse organization, of working for an organization that cares about DEI. And when specifically thinking about millennials, younger millennials, and Generation Z, we know that these individuals have grown up in a global society where they're more privy to seeing others from different races, learning more about people who may be different from them. So, as we think about the midterm and long term goals of our organizations, it's important that we are proactive in our strategies so that our businesses excuse me, so that our businesses can continue to thrive, thinking about future changes amongst the workforce and our generations. And I always like to use a little bit of humor. It's important to be nice to everyone. Think about what happens. We may watch a sci fi movie where there's an alien apocalypse and aliens are attacking the country. And we see in these movies, in those situations, everyone is coming together. We're all humans. Let's bond together and join together to face adversity and make sure that we win against the extraterrestrials. We shouldn't necessarily wait till a major situation occurs to have these types of feelings. We're all in this together. We're all on the earth, floating in space, getting through life together. So we should keep these ideals of just being kind to one another, respecting one another as paramount. So I talked about why DEI is important from the humanistic perspective, just because we're all humans. But next, I'll pass it on to Lisa to talk about why DEI is important from the people perspective.
Thank you, Will. So as Will said, I'm going to dive a little bit more into the people perspective of things. I'm sure many of you on the call are in the HR function and are being called upon to either be a part of or lead these initiatives. I want to start with some stats. As you can see on the screen, I feel really underline the importance of these topics. These stats come from a SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management survey that was conducted in 2021. So looking at the first two stats, DEI has direct ties to the performance of your business. Diverse companies are 35% more likely to outperform their competitors, and companies with diversity at the management level report an average of 19% more revenue. Really can argue with those stats. Now, the next two stats illustrate improvements that companies have made, especially over the past couple of years, but also identify some areas of opportunity. So looking at this first one, 74% of respondents from this SHRM survey noted that they track the diversity of new hires. However, when tracking retention, this drops to only 47%. To me, this is reminiscent of the notion of the broken rung, or the barriers that minority groups, women face when moving to a manager or more senior level. So maybe while folks are expanding their talent pools, they're tracking the applicants, the new hires that are coming in, and that diversity is increasing. What does it look like when you get beyond those entry-level roles? What's it looking like at the manager level, at the senior leadership level? So examining the retention and promotion metrics can really take your initiatives to the next level and get that 47% number closer up to that 74%. And move on to the next slide. Continuing on this trend, a few more stats of underlying the importance of DEI as well as where we're currently at. Will was discussing generations in the workplace a few slides ago, and this data comes from Exude, showing that 83% of millennial employees are more likely to be engaged at inclusive companies. This is huge. You want your employees to be satisfied and happy at work, but engagement is that next level. That means they're dialed in, they're coming to work every day, they're really investing in what your company is doing, they care about where they work, and you want to be working to always increase this engagement level, or if it's at a great place, maintain it. Looking at the second stat, Americans are living longer and working longer, which is great, leading to 1 in 5 Americans being 65 and older by the year 2030. That will be a significant portion of your workforce being in this age bracket. How are you ensuring inclusivity for them in your workplace as well? For this last stat, moving on again to kind of where we're at right now, this stat is going back to the SHRM survey, and 65% of organizations said that DEI is a high strategic priority for them. That's what we mean when we say talking the talk. Verbally committed, DEI is important, we need to focus on it. However, if you look at these stats that are smaller on the bottom of the screen, 33% of companies say that they have been very successful in their DEI efforts. 38% say they've had moderate success, and 29% say they've had not very much success. So how can we bridge this gap between that verbal commitment, talking the talk, and action, walking the walk? So let's say you have made that verbal commitment. You're committed to DEI initiatives in your workplace. Great. Now what? How can you take that step from talking the talk to walking the walk? Let's start with just some basic questions. Sit with these and reflect on them for a bit. How is your organization helping employees to bring their authentic selves to work? The answers to these questions may look different to every person on this call, given your unique organization and the unique employees that work there. Next, what has your organization's approach been in the past to create a welcoming and inclusive environment? You may not have an answer to this right away, and that's okay. It's showing you where to start. How does your organization listen to your employees? Are there avenues in place for employees to provide feedback, comments, concerns regarding your organization? Is the environment that you've created comfortable and safe for employees to do so? Are you actually listening to what they're saying, or is this feedback kind of going into an echo chamber? Again, it's okay if you don't pass the test on these first 3 questions. It's really giving you a baseline, a benchmark, seeing where you're at and what your next step might be from here.
So far, everyone, we've defined DEI in our perspective, and we've shared many statistics on why DEI is important. The next thing you want to think about is the importance of taking action. Thinking back to one of the recent statistics that Lisa shared, if organizational leaders are finding that their organizations are a little bit behind or lacking in their DEI initiatives, what can you expect that the employees, the members of your organization, are saying? If leadership feels that their organizations are behind, you know, of course, that employees will most likely feel the same. So it's important to consider ways that you can take intentional action. And again, before Lisa shares these ideals, again, keep in mind, as we mentioned, these are not necessarily rules or ideas to be followed to a T. These are more so considerations and ideas that you should keep in mind when thinking about your specific organization. And again, it's important that we not only talk the talk, but how can we walk the walk, Lisa?
That's a great point. Well, and I just really want to emphasize what you just said about this looking differently for each of you in your organizations. And we want this to kind of be more of a guide or a blueprint that you can kind of take what works for you and tweak to match what works best for your organization. So thank you for emphasizing that. Starting this off with another stat. We love stats in this presentation. 71% of business leaders somewhat or strongly agree that their organization's DEI efforts are behind where they should be. Will just talked about that. If your business leaders are thinking that, you can pretty much bet that your employees are also thinking that. But how can we catch up? I think where a lot of leaders, HR practitioners, they get stuck if they don't feel that they know all the answers or they have a clear strategy. They have the whole process or the whole plan laid out. With these initiatives, we really want to emphasize the point that it's so important to just start somewhere. Lack of action shouldn't be an option here. Authenticity, being authentic, transparency, these are key. People respect transparency. It's okay if you don't have all the answers, and it is okay to admit that you don't have all the answers. As we've mentioned, DEI is really about empathy, and it's important to have empathy with yourself. You're not being called upon to single-handedly solve this issue. It's not even an issue that needs to be really solved. It's an ever-evolving idea that will look different year over year, month over month, organization over organization. Lastly, we encourage you to use outside resources. As we said, we both serve in the DEI Advisory Council. We are not subject matter experts here. We know what has worked well for our organization. We're passionate about it, but we've partnered with a third-party firm to conduct a DEI cultural assessment survey and focus groups. That was an area that we didn't feel super comfortable doing on our own, so we wanted to rely on an outside subject matter expert to really help guide our future initiatives. There's a world of expertise out there for these larger initiatives that you might not feel comfortable conducting on your own. So doubling down on my transparency and authenticity theme here, be willing to have conversations. Take the emotional risk. Showing empathy is not a weakness. Have conversations with leaders, with employees, and it's okay, like I said, if you don't have all the answers, trying and maybe making mistakes or not doing it correctly the first time is a lot better than doing nothing. Be transparent in your efforts. Break down the notion of DEI into the smallest pieces possible. You're not going to wake up one day and have a fully fledged DEI action plan for the next 5 years. But if fear of not having that is preventing you from taking action, that's where that problem lies. That's where there's that gap between talking the talk and walking the walk. Taking that first small step, as we say on the left side of the slide, can lead to that big impact down the line. And a couple more tips that are not listed here. Will alluded to this, leadership buy-in is imperative. It's important for your employees to see that commitment from the top down. And like I mentioned a bit earlier, remember that DEI is an evolving topic. It's not a box to be checked. Excuse me. You won't be able to kind of get it all done from the outset for the reason we just mentioned. So you've broken things down. You have a small step to start with. How do you ensure it gets off the ground? You plan it out. I love to plan, and this process can really be used for any project at any organization, but we're really looking at it from a DEI lens here. For example's sake, let's say your first small step is, okay, I want to form a voluntary DEI committee. Just get some folks together that are interested in this topic, passionate about improving our organization. And that can be step one. It doesn't have to be what the committee is going to do, where it's going to go from there. It's just forming the committee. That's your small step. So start by reviewing your action items. What needs to be done? Does a survey need to go out to gauge interest in the committee? Maybe you need that leadership buy-in I just mentioned. How many members will you have in the committee? Next, you move on to timeframes. How long do you feasibly need to accomplish this? What will you give yourself for a time frame goal? Next, we will come to assigning responsibility. And I really, really love the DACI model for the framework here. DACI is DACI, and it's a framework that clearly outlines who's responsible for what in a decision-making process or a project. D is for driver. This is likely you in this scenario, but they're the owner of the project, the one who's ultimately responsible for moving it forward. A is for approver. This is the person whose thumbs up is needed to get the project to that next level or move it forward. This could be a member of leadership. It might also be you in this case. We move on to C next. C is for contributor or contributors. These are the folks who share opinions, help shape the project, and complete necessary tasks, usually delegated by the driver. Finally, the I is for informed. These folks are not part of the project. They don't really have much of a say, but they may be impacted by it and they need to be informed of what's going on. Outlining these responsibilities is so important as it can help eliminate roadblocks, hesitancy, or any kind of red tape. For example, comes up a lot that maybe an informed thinks that they're an approver. So setting that expectation of who's responsible for what, who's not responsible for what from the outset can hopefully eliminate some of those obstacles and get that project moving forward. Now, lastly, at these last two bullets, decide how you'll measure the success of the initiative. You won't be able to gauge whether or not the process was successful and what to change in the future, where to go from there, if you don't already predetermine what you'll consider success. Let's go to that committee example. Maybe it's having 15 people attend an informational meeting. Maybe it's having 5 signups or 10 signups for the committee. Maybe it's getting it added to the official list of employee groups. And celebrate these milestones. As we've said, small steps make a big impact. So if measuring success for you means having 5 members as part of your initial DEI committee, celebrate that win. That's that small step that's only going to snowball from there into making a big impact at your organization.
We've talked about some ideas or steps to keep in place when determining and fine-tuning your organization's DEI practices. Now we want to take a moment and let you know about what Sentinel has done over the past few years. As Lisa said, DEI is an ever-evolving topic, and we know that we have more work to do in the future, but we think it's also important to share that we have walked the walk. We still have more walking to do, but we want to share with you some things that have worked well for our organization. And again, these are ideas to keep in mind. Just because these ideas have worked for Sentinel, that might not mean that these are the best strategies for your organization. Just considerations to keep in place. Thinking back to 2020, our organization, just like many organizations at that time, took an intentional approach to showing the importance and care for DEI at our organization. This started with a message and a call for action from our president and CEO, Sam Mitchell, talking about the importance of DEI for himself, our organization, and our organization continuing to grow and improve our culture. As Lisa mentioned earlier, it's really important to have leadership buy-in when thinking about your DEI initiatives. If company leaders are not showing the importance of this, you can expect that that might not be illustrated to other working members at the organization. So again, it's really important for leadership to have buy-in and illustrate and genuinely show their care and the importance of DEI. With that initial message from our president and CEO, he put out a call to action. For 2021, we will be establishing our DEI Exploratory Committee. And here, that's exactly what it sounds like. The committee was opened up for voluntary members to join the committee if they wished, for us to begin having those small discussions, those conversations about our organization, what DEI may look like for us. This included doing some individual and group learning on DEI, microaggressions, authenticity in the workplace, just doing everything we could to ramp ourselves up to really think about moving our initiatives forward. Towards the end of 2021, we decided to evolve our exploratory committee into our official DEI advisory council. And again, here we opened this up for voluntary membership. And one thing about our advisory council is that with working with our council, we really see the importance of diversity of thought and how having a diverse group brings so many new perspectives and wonderful ideas to the conversation. Our advisory council has members from various business units, various leadership levels, backgrounds, experiences, and across different regions. And we find that having those various informed perspectives makes the work that we do even more robust. One thing that we decided to do with our advisory council is to segment that council into three working groups. Our larger council is about 15 members, which can be a lot of members to have their hand in the pot. So, what we decided to do was segment our advisory council into three working subcommittees. One subcommittee dedicated to communications, one subcommittee dedicated to be a liaison to our people and culture group, and another subcommittee to be a liaison to our Sentinel Cares philanthropic arm of our organization. Here at Sentinel, we are really interested in making sure that our care and the importance of DEI is really embedded into the threads of our cultural fabric. And we decided to do so working through these three subgroups might be best for this time because people and culture, Sentinel Cares, and communications, our marketing group, those are three groups within our organization that are truly responsible for building and promoting our culture. So again, we work through three subcommittees for these respective groups, but this might not necessarily work for your organization. You want to think about what works best for you. This year, 2022, we've moved forward with our advisory council. We really got our boots on the ground and we were able to get some things done. For example, we've created our mission and vision statement for our advisory council. And as Lisa mentioned, we decided to work with a third party firm to help us with our DEI cultural assessment. Research shows that when organizations undertake certain research activities themselves, employees might feel that there's a lack of trust, there's a lack of anonymity. So for us, we found it was best to work with a third party firm to help us with our DE&I research. One thing that we've done also is expanded our flexibility in work. Just like many organizations during the pandemic, we had to immediately shift to being able to do remote and hybrid work. But once things started getting better with the pandemic, our organization found that we successfully made that switch in March 2020 from being in office to remote work. We see that our members of our organization really have the ability to work everywhere, but be engaged anywhere. So when many organizations started deciding a return to work policy, our organization did two things. First, identified which positions could be changed to hybrid or remote work. And one thing that did, that allowed us to expand our hiring practices and start hiring individuals from across the entire country. And we already see with certain statistics how this has improved our diversity numbers, our cultural feedback from our staff. Again, small steps can make a big impact. And another thing that we did was actually listened to the staff. As Lisa mentioned earlier, it's important that you listen to your organization. So when thinking about our return to work policy, we received a survey from people in culture. Tell us about how working remotely has worked for you. When we return to work, what is your interest in working full time in the office? What is your interest in being remote? What is your interest in being hybrid? And I believe that that was truly beneficial because our organization really cared about how employees felt, what their thoughts were, and we used that to review and revamp our policies moving forward. And another thing that we've done is we're continuing to hear and learn from each other. For example, we have our DEI discussion series, which are informal group discussions where we talk and give commentary about certain topics under DEI, authenticity in the workplace, dimensions of diversity, etc. And these DEI discussion series also serve as a forum for folks to share their experiences with DEI and the topics at hand, but also as a chance for others to get to meet other members of our organization who they may not often work with or they may not work with at all. So again, just promoting folks telling their stories and folks hearing and learning from each other was very beneficial for us. Another thing that we've done that's worked well is that we do DEI stories. All of the members of our advisory council have wrote personalized stories giving some education on certain DEI topics, but more importantly, sharing with members of our organization why DEI is important to us. And we've received so much wonderful feedback on those stories. Oh my God, thank you for that vulnerability and sharing your story. I feel the same way. Wow, thank you for bringing this topic to my attention. As a person of a certain background, I never thought about this, and this helps me think about things from another's perspective. So, again, we really like hearing and learning from each other, and we want to continue doing so. Now, while we've done some things in these past few years, we know that we have more work to do moving forward. So, thinking about our plans for the future, we just finalized our cultural assessment for our DEI research. Our third party organization will be reporting their findings back to us at the top of the new year so that leadership, people in culture, and the DEI Advisory Council can strategically think about initiatives and ways to further improve our organization's culture. We plan to continue doing the work and setting further goals. And one thing that we're also interested in after hearing back from this cultural assessment is establishing some sort of ERGs or employee resource groups just to further facilitate the conversations and our initiatives moving forward. Again, we've done some good work thus far, but we know that there is more to do, and we're looking forward to that. Now, we've talked about the importance of DE&I from the humanistic perspective, but also the business, the people and culture perspective. We've shared some tips and ideas of considerations that you might want to think about when doing your organization's DEI strategy. But now we want to hear from you. Lisa and I, we did a lot of talking. It's your turn. What questions do you have? What commentary can we have? Again, the Q&A function is open. Let us know what questions you have.
We'll give everyone a few seconds as questions roll in. We have a few ready to go. So Will and Lisa, when you're ready, I can read them off. All right, question number one. Is there an ideal number of members for a DE&I committee?
I think as Will mentioned, this will, again, look different to every organization. We're an organization of about 250. So we set a cap for our DEI Advisory Council at 15. As Will mentioned, sometimes in those larger group meetings, that's a good amount of people. So if you do find that you have a lot of interest and you want that group to be larger, maybe trying to take some of those subcommittees like we had mentioned, and they can look a little bit different at different organizations, but focusing smaller groups on different pieces of that overall DEI umbrella can help to get more things done, as opposed to too many cooks in the kitchen, to use the cliche.
I totally agree with Lisa. And just to add on to that, when thinking about your advisory council or whatever committee you put in place, you want to make sure that there is enough space on the committee for any individual within your organization to join. So we talked about the importance of leadership buy-in with the DEI initiatives. We know that your HR or your people and culture department is very, very important when thinking about cultural initiatives. But one thing to keep in mind is that when thinking about an organization's DEI strategy, each one of us has a part to play with those strategies, even individual contributors. Research shows that when individuals leave organizations, they don't leave organizations because of leadership or higher level organization policies. Folks usually leave organizations due to issues that they might have with their immediate working group or their manager. So I share that statistic to show how all of us are really important in creating our organization's culture, whether we're a leader, a HR representative, or just an employee working to create the culture for all of our other coworkers as well. I think that was a great question. Keep them coming, Kendall.
Going off of that, I think you guys have done a great job covering, how to divide and conquer. But I have a question that just came in, and it's how often would it be optimal for the committee to meet? So if you have these subcommittees, how often do you guys meet?
I'll take that one, if you don't mind, Lisa. So
No?
again, what works for your organization? So for this year, the way that we've um, done our meeting schedule is that our larger advisory council meets every 6 weeks, but our subcommittees, those small working groups, meet on a bi-weekly basis. And one thing I want to share is that with our last DEI Advisory Council meeting, we found that yes, our meetings have worked great, but many of our members said, hey, 6 weeks might be too far apart for the larger advisory council to meet. Maybe we should meet on a monthly basis. So again, dependent on your organization. But I wanted to share that as an example because, as earlier Lisa said, don't be afraid of making mistakes. And we see that while our initiatives have worked well, we've gotten some feedback that we need to meet a little more often.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, next up. Have you seen a connection between DE&I, community involvement, and a commitment to employee learning and development?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, like Will mentioned, one of our subcommittees is directly related to Sentinel Cares, which is our volunteerism corporate philanthropy arm of the organization. So that team works with our head of Sentinel Cares. He's part of the subcommittee, making sure that our community engagement has kind of that DEI lens, making sure we're reaching out to all members of the community. As far as employee development goes, I think we have employee training, we've had manager trainings around DEI. Some of our discussion series involve learning topics. Our educational exchange of the annual event has had speakers that speak on the topics of DEI. So I think it's provided an avenue for folks that are interested and want to be involved and want to learn more about this topic to continue to foster that learning.
Thanks, Lisa. All right, next, for aging employee populations, do you have any ideas on how to bridge the gap between younger and older generations in terms of skill levels, productivity, responsibility, and leadership?
I'll take that one. I think it's just really important for our organizations to promote the importance of having a collaborative culture. So like one thing here at Sentinel is we're really big on great teamwork within our teams, having one-on-one reviews, and more importantly, asking when we need help. If I am, struggling with my workload, it's promoted. Will you have team members to reach out to and assist you? Same for Lisa. So I think just creating arenas for individuals from different age groups to be able to work together and learn from each other is a good way to tackle that.
Thanks, Will. All right, it looks like we have one more question. What types of conversations do you host with employees to get the conversation going?
That's a great question. I can start this, and Will, if you have anything to add, but I think maybe the asker of this question is thinking about the discussion series that we were talking about. So what we've done with these discussion series is we've opened it up to the entire organization, and we've had a loose theme for each one. It's not to say that like nothing else can be talked about, but for example, we've done one on microaggressions and unconscious bias. We are planning one for next year about allyship and what it means to be an ally. And so how we typically structure these discussions is the entire group or everyone that's interested joins. We have either an outside speaker or a member of the committee do a very short, maybe a couple of slides, maybe no slides, a short presentation about the topic. So what is a microaggression? What does unconscious bias look like? What does it mean? Then we break people into breakout rooms. We usually have a member of the DEI Advisory Council be in each breakout room to kind of maybe foster the conversation. And we just invite folks to talk about if they've had any sort of experiences, if they've heard any other stories, if they have questions, really make it an honest and very informal dialogue. We bring the whole group back together at the end. Maybe a spokesperson from each group wants to share something a theme that their group landed on, maybe they don't, but there's really no ultimate, I would say, outcome that we're looking at as part of these discussions. It's really just making sure everyone feels comfortable to ask questions if it's something they're not familiar about, share their own experiences, talk with individuals, get different experience, get different diversity of thought, different perspectives. But I think having that loose theme and having someone to kind of kick off that conversation before you break into the breakout rooms, then having those smaller groups where folks might feel comfortable speaking up as opposed to a larger Zoom meeting. That's how we kind of have been able to get the conversation going. And being a part of those breakout rooms, I've found great conversations that have come up out of those, really meaningful ones.
And then I think the only thing I would add, so Lisa responded to the question from the DEI Advisory Council perspective. I want to take this up to the higher level, larger organizational perspective. When we started consulting with our DEI research team, one thing that was illustrated is that yes, DEI is paramount, DEI is important, but everything that relates to DE&I does not necessarily have to be labeled DE&I. So for example, earlier we talked about the importance of actually listening to what your employees have to say. So another thing that we do is we have so many avenues for people to share their feedback. Our operating committee, our people and culture committee is very, very open to hearing from employees and always promoting that we want to hear what you have to say. We have our anonymous suggestion box where if individuals don't feel comfortable sharing certain things with who they are being known, they can share certain suggestions anonymously. Doing our third-party research and having those focus groups being led by a third-party consultant where members of leadership, members of people and culture are not sitting in on those groups to further create trust and anonymity amongst our employees so that that third-party representative can anonymize their findings and report them back to our organization. So outside of our DEI discussion series, our trainings, really just creating multiple avenues for our employees to share their feedback, their commentary, their concerns, etc.